The Steam Summer Sale is live, so we are counting down the best indie game deals from highest price to lowest, beginning with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, one of my favourite Metroidvanias, no, scratch that, Igavanias ever, coming to us from legendary game developer Koji Igarashi after his departure from Konami and the Castlevania franchise. You play as Miriam, a shardbinder who has to battle her way through a demon-infested castle to stop a dark ritual from happening, having a pretty cool industrial age kind of setting twisted by alchemy and curses. You are able to collect and absorb shards from enemies, which grant special abilities, having the classic Castlevania-style RPG progression, so in theory, you can grind to become overpowered if you so choose. There's a ton of variety here, from weapons to abilities and enemies, including a cameo from Shovel Knight and more Easter eggs, and it was somewhat of a miracle that this game got to the state that it is in following a rough early showing. Post-launch, they have added a bunch of free content and is complete, making it the best time to play this, especially since a prequel just got confirmed, which should be out in 2026. Developer Mimimi Games made some of the best real-time stealth tactics titles, but were unable to find a way to sustain themselves, making Shadow Gambit The Cursed Crew their last official title. A fantastic one of these, where you lead undead pirates on stealth missions across fortified islands. Set in a mystical Caribbean archipelago cursed by the Inquisition, you awaken ghostly crew members aboard your haunted ship, taking on missions on your quest to find a powerful relic. Each mission plays out like a puzzle sandbox, where enemies follow patrol routes and use alarm systems, but since you're controlling undead pirates, these have special abilities which you can use to avoid detection or to get the jump on enemies. Choose your team before each mission, selecting from a crew of 8 shipmates, offering replayability and variety in the strategy, which feels satisfying when you pull off multi-character combos. Crew members have their own progression system and unlocks, and is pretty much stealth game perfection, so pour one out for the developer, but 75% discount is pretty sweet, so do give this a go. Developer Giant Squid is known for their absolutely gorgeous games, having made the underwater exploration title Abzu, as well as the upcoming Sword of the Sea, with the Pathless being a very pretty game as well. A third-person, movement-focused action-adventure game where you have to shoot targets while on the run to gain speed and momentum as you travel to various cursed temples to purify them as you work towards dispelling a curse of darkness. You and your eagle companion must work together, with the latter giving you some added mobility options like gliding, where movement is just smooth as butter and feels great. You are chaining together fluid parkour-like runs across the world, using the speed to solve environmental puzzles, and where cleansing said temples causes gigantic fiery bosses to spawn, which you then need to deal with the combat, so to speak, resembling something more like Shadow of the Colossus instead of Dark Souls. But honestly, the art style is the main draw to me. One of the best crafting sandbox titles is ASTRONEER, a planetary sandbox, so to speak, where you terraform alien worlds, mine resources, and build automated bases. Explore procedurally generated planets which are themed and constrained, so not completely random like in No Man's Sky, with the goal being to survive and to uncover the mysteries of the universe. This has your classic survival game gameplay loop, which revolves around digging, sculpting, and crafting, with the space setting meaning that being tethered to an oxygen source is critical as well. Research new technology and progress up the tech tree through the use of bytes gathered from wrecks and samples, unlocking new structures like smelters, solar arrays, and atmospheric processors. There are also vehicles which expand the range of exploration, with the freeform nature of this being uniquely suited for multiplayer and screwing around with your friends, while not leaning over into the hardcore automation of something like a Satisfactory. Post 1.0, the developers are still releasing updates for the game, the most recent of which was on June 18th, 2025, so 67% discount is an awesome deal. One of my favourite games of 2024 is Songs of Conquest, a turn-based strategy title with hex grid-based combat, overworld exploration and castle building, being a spiritual successor to the Heroes of Might and Magic franchise, but is doing its own thing. You control wielders, which are the heroes in this game, each leading an army of fantasy creatures to conquer the world, either through the story campaign or in skirmish mode. The magic system here is of interest since it is dependent on essence, which is generated by your troops, resulting in interesting strategy implications when thinking about army composition. I absolutely love the pixel art, and post-launch they have been releasing new factions as DLC and looks to get even better. One of the secret best games of 2022 is Thymesia, a fast-paced action RPG with Souls-like influence, although it does lean more towards the Sekiro end of things, where you can execute enemies if you deplete their meter, but you yourself do not have to be concerned about stamina. However, that does not mean you can just go ham and wail on enemies, since you do need to dodge, parry, and counter as well. Set in a kingdom overrun by grotesque monsters, you play as Corvus, a plague doctor-looking character battling his way through as he pieces together his lost memories. You wield the plague as a weapon, seizing enemy powers to use as your own, while also being able to transform into a raven form during combat for additional options. Of course, there are plenty of RPG-style progression systems as well, so if you are waiting for more Sekiro, this is worth a try at 66% off. Megaquarium is a tycoon management game where you design and run your very own aquarium full of colourful marine life. Think Zoo Tycoon but fish, and you get the idea. You are setting up tanks, hiring staff, and juggling visitor needs while having to keep dozens of fish species alive and happy, and also watching the bottom line to ensure that you stay in business. The core challenge comes from balancing animal requirements like water quality, tank mates, and feeding habits while managing space and power requirements. As your reputation grows, you unlock new animals, research, and deal with increasingly complex exhibit layouts, but this is introduced at a steady pace in the story mode, so not to worry there, where I myself am partial to fish, having kept some in my youth, so of course this appeals to me. Due to localization and import-related issues in the past, there is some confusion between the Monster Boy and Wonder Boy series, which are the same franchise but named differently in different territories, like how Final Fantasy was for many years. But put technicalities aside and get Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom, since this is excellent. It is a Metroidvania with the main gimmick of swapping between different animal forms like a pig or a dragon, used in both exploration and combat. Set in a vibrant, cartoony world, you play as Jin, who has been hexed by his uncle Nabu and turned into an animal, journeying across the kingdom to unlock new animal forms in order to stop him. Each animal has unique powers like flight, swimming, or wall climbing, used, of course, in a Metroidvania fashion to allow you to access new areas, unlocking shortcuts and having that looping level design, and is an accidentally made one of these. There are magic and health upgrades as well as loot to find, where admittedly the $30 price tag might have prevented you from trying this, which makes the 75% discount even sweeter. Super Hot is from 2016, but it still holds up and is an iconic indie game looking like a first-person shooter, but is actually a puzzle game. Time only moves when you move in this game, meaning that it's not so much about split-second reaction time, but thinking your way out of situations. It has a cool, minimalist art style and is level-based, each being short, self-contained scenarios where getting hit means restarting. You pick up weapons, throw objects, and grab guns from fallen enemies, plotting your path through the level, where sidestepping a bullet, landing a punch, and then switching to a shotgun to blast away remaining enemies is an example of the action simply being cool as hell and worth a play. If the recent success of Date Everything is anything to go by, people do love their anthropomorphic dating sims, with Boyfriend Dungeon being another such example from 2021. This plays like a dungeon crawler, but with the twist being that your weapons can transform into anthropomorphic versions, fight monsters to level up your gear, then go on dates to unlock new abilities with a variety of unique weapons, each with its own fighting style and personality. There is a visual novel element, and strengthening your relationship with said weapon powers them up even more, so if you thought that dating sims had no gameplay or combat, this title will prove you wrong. One of the coolest looking titles is Cloudpunk, a narrative-driven exploration game in which you pilot a hover car to complete delivery jobs across a cyberpunk metropolis. Set in a neon-soaked cyberpunk world, it is your first night on the job as a delivery driver, where you're presented with only 2 rules: don't miss a delivery and don't ask what's in the package. Of course, that kind of mysterious setup is perfect for a cyberpunk setting filled with mystery, intrigue, conspiracy, and even a dose of artificial intelligence. You are exploring the city on foot and in your vehicle, with full driving mechanics as well as narrative choices to be made. Interestingly, this game started off with only a third-person camera, but the cockpit first-person view was added later, which is a great way to see the gorgeous voxel art up close, with there also being a sequel named Valis which has been announced, so if interested, definitely play the original first. Another interesting title which you might have missed is Lost Ruins, a pixel art action platformer with Metroidvania influence, but one with a unique gimmick. You're exploring hostile ruins and dungeons while attempting to reclaim your memories, hoping to find a way home, but in the way are all sorts of monsters, including monster girl bosses, so swing your sword and use magic to defeat them. Combat emphasizes timing and weapon switching, with each foe requiring different strategies to defeat, coming in the form of gear loadouts which are especially critical. Things which you might not usually think of in a side-scroller like elemental resistance become critical depending on the boss and combat arena you are presented with, where it behooves you to equip the right gear or face an untimely death. While there are interconnected areas with shortcuts to unlock and hidden items to discover, it is fairly linear in that you are progressing from one boss to the next, where I really like the look as well, and I'm curious as to what this developer is working on next. Speaking of monster girls, Minoria comes to us from the developer of Momodora, but it's a standalone title, and similarly, it's a Metroidvania, where you play as Sister Semilia on a mission to purge heresy, which is similar enough to the Shrine Maiden setup in the other series. However, instead of pixel art, this is a 2.5D title that looks alright, with intense combat as a central focus, as well as a moody, mysterious narrative. It is set against the backdrop of religious upheaval as you hunt down heretical witches, using dodge rolls, parries, and magic in order to do so, with classic Metroidvania style progression, so it's interesting to see another attempt from this developer at this sort of title without the constraints of the earlier series, with 65% discount resulting in a good price to pick this up. Developer Landfall has been absolutely crushing it with all their releases, not taking things too seriously, with humor being a connecting thread, with an excellent example being Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. This is a physics-based strategy sandbox title where you pit absurd armies against each other with wobbly physics and hilarity ensues. You are selecting from units across diverse historical eras and fantasy themes, attempting to answer questions such as what will happen when 100 mammoths faces off against an army of hoplites with catapults, or do 100 club-wielding cavemen stand a chance against Zeus himself. All these and more, with the campaign mode having you coming up with strategies to defeat preset armies, while Sandbox allows you to simulate both sides. You can also create your own units and levels, resulting in near infinite replayability, and is just a wacky good time. A title that looks like a physics sandbox but isn't is Supraland 6 Inches Under, the follow-up to an excellent first-person Metroidvania set to be a mix between Portal, Zelda, and Metroid. This game has an interesting history, starting off as DLC to the original Supraland, which is excellent, but then kind of took on a life of its own, becoming something like Supraland 1.5, not quite a DLC and not quite a sequel either, so they decided to release it as a standalone title, and it is pretty good. It takes place in a literal sandbox, so imagine everyday objects but where you are a tiny character. There's good combat and fun Metroidvania style exploration and puzzles, being a steal at 67% discount. A single player first person survival game which was, pardon the pun, a breath of fresh air is Breathedge, focusing on a central narrative instead of just throwing you out in the middle of nowhere with no story. Set in the aftermath of a space funeral gone wrong, our hero has to scavenge derelict space wreckage and craft tools to stay alive. You float through zero-gravity corridors and fields of space junk while juggling oxygen limits, radiation hazards, and malfunctioning gear. Collected junk can be processed and used to fabricate new equipment like oxygen tanks, propulsion modules, and power tools, gradually expanding your range and allowing you to explore further. I like that this game has a definitive end and has been likened to Space Subnautica, which is an apt comparison, where it is one of the best with a sequel announced as well, so get the original if you have not played it. One of the cutest and cleverest titles ever is Carto, a tile-based puzzle adventure game centered on cartography and maps, where you are moving tiles to alter the world around you, getting to new locations to solve puzzles as you attempt to find your way back to your family. It has a whimsical setting full of oddball characters where you're taking on missions to help people with your unique cartography skills. Each area is made up of square tiles which you can pick up, rotate and place to reshape the lay of the land, with new tiles appearing depending on how you place existing ones. There's no combat or fail states, encouraging experimentation and curiosity with just the most wonderful art that will give you fuzzy feelings in your tummy.
Wake up, sleeper. Dreaming again?
Going on to a very different kind of vibe is Citizen Sleeper, the hit narrative RPG that has its roots in tabletop RPGs, but not Dungeons & Dragons, which most CRPGs tend to take from. Rather, you play as an escaped synthetic worker trying to escape corporate control, making a way to a lawless space station at the edge of interstellar society, populated by refugees, hackers, and rogue AI. You roll a limited number of dice each turn and have to assign them to tasks, with the dice value affecting success or failure, weighing risk and reward. The cast of characters is unique, which you will get to know, having to make critical narrative choices that shape their fate, and is quite the intellectual title with a bunch of reading, so know that going in, but what a special game this is. One of the best indie games of all time is just $6, so get CrossCode since it is highly recommended by me. This is a 2D action-adventure title set in a fictional MMO world where your player avatar is amnesiac and mute, and you must figure out why and what is going on. Battle your way through the world, encountering recurring NPCs which are characters in themselves, as you do very MMO things like the equivalent of killing rats and fetch quests, which then leads into a grand JRPG style narrative. Combat is the highlight, blending fast melee attacks with charged projectile shots, dodging and timed counters which evolve over time, where you're graded with a letter rank system which encourages efficient dispatching of enemies. The one caveat here is that some people have said that this is a puzzle game with action elements rather than a Zelda-style action-adventure game with puzzles, and have experienced frustration with that, although personally I did not find that to be an issue, with the whole simulated MMO that they created being a fascinating setting, and once you're done with the main game, there's a good DLC titled A New Home to check out as well. If you love tactics titles, Fae Tactics is a great one of these, having some similarities with the Final Fantasy Tactics of the world, but with an almost monster-taming twist. Set in a colourful fantasy world split between human and Fae, you play as Peony as she travels across the land searching for her mother, fighting alongside elemental companions in intense tactics combat. Every unit has a primary element that interacts with other elements, having the rock-paper-scissors style strengths and weaknesses, with positioning being critical as well, since backstabs and elevation does give you an advantage. Adjacent allies enable combo chains, so the team composition and which Fae creatures you use will matter. Between missions, there are RPG-like progression systems to level up your characters and to unlock new abilities, and I do like the pixel art as well and will be for fans of the genre. A very unique roguelite deck builder is Ring of Pain, a dungeon crawler with some horror vibes where you are exploring the dungeon through a rotating ring of cards, which is interesting to wrap your head around. The creepy, surreal, shifting world is excellent due to the art style and monster designs, where you explore rooms by choosing a path card by card, where enemies, loot and traps are presented to you. Equipment and gear is critical for your strategy, but there are only a limited number of slots, forcing you to choose. Still, if you love strategy roguelites, this is a fantastic, fresh title which is not just a Slay the Spire clone, with 70% discount being a great deal as well. The Steam Summer Sale is a good time to check out weird, more out there indie games, with the title of interest here being Velfaris Mechatherion, the follow-up to Velfaris and to some extent Slain Back from Hell, but for some reason this is a shoot 'em up instead of an action platformer. Yes, you heard me right, this is a side-scrolling shooter reminiscent of the good old days, where don't get me wrong, this is a genre which is near and dear to my heart, but has fallen out of favour in recent days. But I guess there's nothing more indie than a developer making a game that he wants to make regardless of commercial outcome, so 3 cheers to that. You are piloting a giant heavy metal mech through alien strongholds, essentially having rip and tear action as you mix your ranged weapons with swinging and throwing your sword, also having a parry system to deflect projectiles and a charge system for powerful guns, with awesome giant boss fights being fun, so if you love this genre, do check it out. You have to give it to this developer since the cult classic Windjammers has somewhat of a legendary reputation among the video game hardcore, and they clamoured for a follow-up, or at least a modern way to easily play this, so enter Windjammers 2. This is a competitive arcade sports game in which you launch high-speed discs across the court in a tennis-like manner to outscore your opponent, having unique characters that play differently and have their own special moves. The world is bursting with colour and looks awesome, with very fast-paced, intense action as you dash, jump, lob and curve the disc in order to score. Precise timing lets you parry shots or dive into counters, with each stage having their own unique arena quirks. This has not set the world on fire, with there being 3 concurrent players on Steam in the past 24 hours as of recording, so I would recommend this if you have friends to play with, and who knows, this too might attain cult classic status someday. Another hidden gem to check out is Death Trick Double Blind, a narrative-focused detective adventure game in which you swap between 2 characters to investigate a murder at a travelling circus. Set in a 1950s inspired fairground full of illusionists, performers and secrets, you search tents and trailers for evidence while talking to suspects, making dialogue choices, and trying to piece together the timeline which will enable you to solve the case. Each lead character uncovers information that the other can act on as you alternate their perspectives to build up a shared case file. Instead of direct interrogation, you identify contradictions in statements and use them to open up new lines of inquiries, where if you're a fan of the carnival or circus-like setting, this should be of interest. It's not quite October, but you might as well get Faith the Unholy Trinity in preparation for Spooky Month, since this retro horror game is extremely well regarded, where you play as a young priest wielding a crucifix to fight demonic forces and uncover occult secrets. The terrifying pixel art entities look straight out of the 1980s, with there being combat, but is much more intense than it first lets on, where I love indie games since titles like this can exist and be hugely successful, and is a testament to the ingenuity of indie game developers. Watch this for more of the best indie games.